At 4:30 p.m. on Friday, June 14, 2019, at Rosewood Park. The air smelled of summer rain and cotton candy as children's laughter echoed through Rosewood Park. At the heart of the park spun an old carousel, its paint chipped, horses faded, and music box slightly off tune. Yet, for the children, it was magic. 6-year-old Lila Moreau stood at its edge, clutching her favorite pink bunny, Poppy, and tugging her father's sleeve. "Daddy, one more ride, please," she pleaded, eyes bright like sunlight breaking through leaves. Henry Moreau, a young father in his early 30s, still in his work shirt, smiled tiredly. "All right, my little sunflower, one more. But then we go get your mom from the bakery, okay?" She nodded, curls bouncing, and skipped toward the carousel. The operator, an old man named Gerard, lifted her on to the painted horse with a gentle grin. The carousel turned, the tune played, and somewhere in the blur of spinning colors, laughter, and drifting music, Lila vanished. Henry's shouts tore through the park. "Lila! Lila, where are you?" Parents froze. A child missing meant terror in every heart. Within minutes, police were called, and the once carefree park turned into a scene of chaos. The pink bunny was found near the swing set, lying in the dirt. Detective Elena Rousseau, newly transferred from Marseille, arrived at 6:05 p.m. Calm, but visibly shaken, she surveyed the scene. The father pacing in panic, the mother arriving breathless and screaming Lila's name, the setting sun bleeding red over the lake. "Seal the park," Elena ordered softly. "No one leaves." At 7:45 p.m., near the lake bridge, a searchlight cut through mist rising from the water. Volunteers fanned out, combing through tall grass and bushes. "Detective," a voice called. A young officer held up a small object between gloved fingers, a red ribbon, tangled and damp. Elena recognized it immediately from the photograph Henry had shown earlier. Lila had worn it that day in her hair. The father dropped to his knees when he saw it. "She never goes near the water," he whispered, trembling. And by 9 p.m., darkness swallowed the park. The police packed up for the night, setting up tape and mobile floodlights. The carousel's music box, left unturned, creaked in the wind, a haunting melody in the silence. Elena stood by the lake's edge, watching the moon ripple across the black water. Something about the scene unsettled her deeply. The ribbon, the direction of footprints, the absence of drag marks. This was not an accident. Somewhere in that quiet town, someone knew what happened to Lila Moreau.
On Saturday, June 15th, 2019, 6:12 a.m. Morning light crept through the fog like a hesitant ghost. By dawn, Rosewood Park was unrecognizable, cordoned off with yellow tape, police tents flapping in the wind. News vans lined the perimeter, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. Detective Elena Rousseau stood by the lake's edge, coffee in one hand, notes in the other. Her eyes were red from a sleepless night. "Any updates from the divers?" she asked Corporal Jensen. "Still nothing, ma'am. No body. No sign of her." He paused. "The currents are calm. If she fell in, she'd be here." Elena frowned. "Then she didn't fall in." She glanced toward the maintenance shed near the carousel, its padlock broken, door slightly ajar. Check that again. By 8:45 a.m. at the police headquarters in Rosewood. The small-town precinct buzzed like a hornet's nest. Telephones rang non-stop. Officers fielded calls from tipsters, most useless, some hysterical. In the interrogation room, Henry Moreau sat under harsh fluorescent light. His eyes were hollow, hands clasped tightly around a crumpled tissue. He hadn't slept. Elena entered quietly, her voice steady but not unkind. "Mr. Moreau, we need to go over everything again. I know it's painful." He nodded weakly. "I'll answer anything." She placed a recorder on the table. "Start from when you arrived at the park." He spoke slowly, voice trembling. "We got there around 4. Lila wanted the carousel. She rode twice. Then she wanted to feed the ducks. I looked at my phone for a second. Just one message. When I looked up, she was gone." Elena studied him. "You said she doesn't go near the water." "She's afraid of it. Always has been." She leaned forward. "Did you notice anyone watching her? Anyone unusual?" He shook his head. "No one I can remember. Just families. Kids." She turned off the recorder. "One last question. Where was your wife at the time?" "She was at the bakery. She called me at 4:40. I swear she had nothing to do with it." Elena nodded. "We'll verify that." When she left the room, Jensen was waiting in the hallway. "He's our guy. Father always looks first, ma'am." She shot him a cold glance. No assumptions, not yet. On June 16th to 18th, 2019, search parties swept through Rosewood Forest, the lake shore, and every drain pipe in town. Over 200 volunteers joined. Posters of Lila's smiling face, missing, age 6, last seen in yellow dress, fluttered from every lamppost. Marie Moreau stood outside their bakery, handing flyers to anyone who passed. Her eyes were swollen, her voice hoarse. "She loves strawberry ice cream," she kept saying. "Please, just find her." Inside, cameras flashed. News reporters swarmed the couple, their microphones thrust forward like weapons. "Mr. Moreau, police say there are inconsistencies in your timeline. Care to comment? Is it true Lila's parents argued the morning she vanished?" Henry's jaw tightened. "Please, just stop." Marie burst into tears beside him. "You people are monsters." June 19th, 2019, 3:20 p.m. At police headquarters, Elena reviewed CCTV footage from the park's entrance. Most cameras were outdated, their recordings grainy and unreliable. Still, she noticed something. At 4:28 p.m., a white utility van pulled up near the south gate. At 4:51 p.m., it drove away. No clear license plate, no visible driver. She froze the frame, a faint reflection on the van's window. A distorted face, perhaps male, perhaps wearing a cap. She leaned closer, heart quickening. "Jensen," she called. "Get me every registered van within a 20-mile radius. I want owners, routes, and alibis." The investigation grew darker. The lake was drained partially. Nothing. Cadaver dogs picked up faint traces of scent near the maintenance shed, but they led nowhere. Then came the rumors. Some locals swore they'd seen a man talking to Lila days before she vanished. A gardener. Quiet. Strange. Always around the park. His name was Simon Dallinger, 43, groundskeeper for Rosewood Park for nearly 10 years. Lived alone in a cottage behind the arboretum. No wife, no children. Elena ordered a visit. On June 24th, 5:12 p.m. Simon's cottage sat at the edge of the woods, surrounded by tall grass and neglected flowers. He greeted the detectives calmly, wiping dirt from his hands. "Terrible thing what happened to that little girl. I used to see her sometimes, always smiling." Elena scanned the room. Simple furniture, gardening tools stacked neatly, a photo of a young woman on the wall, his late sister, as he explained. But something about his eyes unsettled her. They were steady, too steady. "Where were you on June 14th between 4 and 5? "In the greenhouse, trimming ivy. You can ask the park manager." "And the white van?" He frowned. "Not mine. I ride a bicycle." After a brief search, they found nothing suspicious, just muddy boots and a stack of old park maintenance records. As they left, Elena whispered to Jensen, "He's either harmless or the best liar I've met." At 11:40 p.m., June 26th, Elena replayed the park footage again and again. This time, she noticed something new. A figure in the far left corner, standing near the carousel just as the ride stopped. Someone wearing a dark raincoat, head turned toward Lila. She magnified the image, but the face was indistinct, a blur of pixels. Still, something about the posture, the stance, the slouching shoulders, felt familiar. Could it be Dallinger? She wondered aloud. The thought lingered long into the night. June 28th, 9 a.m. The police issued a public appeal. A reward of 50,000 euros was offered for information leading to Lila's discovery. The town, once peaceful, now lived under a cloud of suspicion. Parents kept their children home. Playgrounds sat empty. A candlelight vigil was held that evening near the park gates. Dozens gathered, holding posters of Lila, their candles flickering like fragile hope. Marie spoke softly through tears. "If anyone has her, please bring her home. She's only 6. She's just a little girl." Henry stood beside her, silent, eyes glazed with exhaustion. Behind them, camera flashes lit the night. June 2nd, 10:18 a.m. Elena called a meeting at headquarters. Still no trace of the van, no ransom, no contact, no body. That tells me one thing. Whoever took her didn't want money. They wanted her. Jensen sighed. "The press is tearing us apart. Half the town thinks it's the father." "Then let them talk. We follow evidence, not gossip." She rubbed her temples. The sleepless nights were catching up. Somewhere, deep down, she feared what her gut already told her. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. It was planned. June 2nd, by 6:40 p.m. As dusk settled over Rosewood, Elena returned alone to the park. The carousel loomed silent, its horses frozen in mid-gallop. The air was heavy with the smell of wet grass and rust. She walked the path where Lila was last seen, tracing each step. The crumbs, the balloon, the ribbon. Every clue had led to emptiness. She paused near the maintenance shed, staring at its broken padlock. Something about it still nagged her. The shed wasn't on the park's maintenance map from last year. Why was that? She turned her flashlight on, stepping closer. Inside, old tools lay scattered. And something else, half buried under a tarp. She knelt. It was a child's shoe, small, yellow, mud-streaked. Her heart stilled. She lifted it gently, breath trembling. The initials inside read, L.M. Elena's voice broke the silence. She was here.
February 3rd, 2020, 6:10 a.m. at County Coroner's Office. The coroner's voice was clinical and slow, each phrase a blow. Elena listened with hands clenched. Cause of death is asphyxiation, smothering. There are no defensive injuries consistent with a struggle. We found microscopic traces of a sedative in the child's bloodstream, a barbiturate-like compound consistent with something administered orally several hours before death. Elena felt the room tilt. Smothered. Sedated. It read as premeditation. Why sedative, she asked. Why not something simpler? Dr. Alvarez tapped a chart. To incapacitate. To keep her quiet. The person who did this did not want noises, did not want a scene. And there are, he thumbed another file, fibers found in multiple places, under the blanket, on clothing fragments, imported wool, unusual weave. We'll run the comparisons. Elena thought of the red ribbon, the pink blanket, the small backpack, all carefully handled by hands that wanted to leave no trace. The city's cold air felt heavier than usual as she left the coroner's office. Someone had chosen restraint and planning over fury. That someone had intended to hit the Moreaus where it hurt most, through the thing they loved. On the evidence board in Rosewood Police Station, new pins shone under light. Sedative. Smothering. Fibers. Photos. The threads connected differently now, pointing not only to a casual predator, but to a perpetrator with access, knowledge, and a capacity to weaponize intimacy. Look at this, Jensen said, handing her a printout. It was the lab's fiber analysis. The fibers matched a very specific tweed overcoat, one made by a local tailor and sold in limited runs. Only a handful had been purchased in the region. Anyone we can trace who owns such a coat? Elena asked. Jensen slid another sheet across the table. Credit card purchases. CCTV stills from a shop on the day. A man's silhouette. A profile Elena hadn't expected to see close up. Local. Known. The name at the top made her stomach drop. Gaston Leclerc. Marie Moreau's older cousin, once close to the family, now estranged. Meanwhile, on February 6, 2020, 11:20 a.m. Gaston arrived at the Moreau residence under the guise of grief. He had been one of the first to post flyers, to make solemn speeches at the vigil. He looked as if he had not slept in weeks. Deep down, he knew he was only there to get his satisfaction, to see them hurting just as he is. His eyes, however, held an old heat Elena had noticed before in case notes about family tension. She asked him the routine questions, but her mind worked through the unthinkable. Why would a relative betray a child? A neighbor's statement had already hinted at something. On June 12, 2019, 2 days before Lila vanished, Gaston had been overheard in a heated argument outside the bakery with Henry. Witnesses heard a threat, vague but vicious. "You took everything from me. You'll pay." Gaston had disappeared from town for a week afterward, a gap previously unexamined. He returned with a new tweed coat and an apology. Elena watched him now, hands folded over his knee. "Where were you the afternoon of June 14th? He was a short man. He liked to clear his head near the park. His voice wavered, but he gave no alibi. February 10th, 2020, 9 p.m. at Rosewood Park. Jensen called her in with something new, a lab comparison between the fibers and fibers found on a scarf stowed away in Gaston's shed during a consensual search. The match was near perfect. Then another hit. Phone data. Gaston's phone pinged a cell mast within a block of the maintenance shed on June 14, 2019, at 4:45 p.m., the exact window of Lila's disappearance. He had a sparse, easily manipulable excuse. He'd taken a walk. But the phone records placed him there. Elena felt the case pivot. Why would he want to do this, Jensen asked. Elena thought of the overheard argument and the long, slow burn of resentment. Then she found the thread that tied motive and method together. The sedative. Lab analysis of a small bottle found in Gaston's rubbish, a cheap pharmacy bottle with its label removed, contained residue of the same sedative found in Lila's blood. Gaston's fingerprints were on the bottle. A motive that once was private, now read as premeditation. Gaston believed the Moreaus had been responsible, indirectly or directly, for the ruin of his life. Years earlier, he'd lost his small carpentry business after a bank foreclosure, where Henry, as a loan officer, had signed the files that sealed the account. Gaston believed that foreclosure ruined his family. The argument at the bakery had been the edge of this smoldering anger. To crush Henry and Marie where they felt it most, Gaston chose death aimed at their child, a wound that would not only destroy them, but haunt them forever. He sedated Lila so she would be passive, smothered her to erase noise and visible trauma, wrapped her in the pink blanket he'd seen Marie use during family visits, a small touch meant to twist the knife. February 11th, 2020, 2:40 p.m. at the Moreau residence. When Elena confronted Marie and Henry with the growing forensic web, the pair were catatonic. Henry denied involvement, insisting their only crime had been panic and a horrible cover-up after finding Lila unconscious near the shed on that storm-swept afternoon. But Henry's story now had to be re-evaluated. Had he and Marie discovered Lila already dead? Or were they unable to see the evidence of a deliberate killing and instead panicked, making choices that further confused the trail? Elena's gut told her something else. The family's panic and the efforts to hide the child's body, however monstrous to accept, were not the same as striking the first blow. Gaston's presence in the park at the right time, the fibers, the sedative bottle, and phone pings formed a far stronger chain than the circumstantial evidence that had pointed to the Moreau's panic. She read the autopsy report again. The pattern of smothering, hand placement, lack of blunt force trauma, sedative in the bloodstream, indicated intent and calm. Whoever killed Lila wanted silence, not spectacle. That was the signature of someone who wanted the parents to live with uncertainty and guilt forever rather than to attract immediate attention with a violent scene. In other words, revenge designed to resonate. At Rosewood Park, on the February 12th, 2020, 8:00 p.m. The discovery of the child's bones was brutal, but the truth that emerged now was colder. Elena stood where children had once fed ducks and listened to nothing but wind. If the killer had wanted them to unravel, he could not have chosen more precisely. A forensic sweep of Gaston's cottage found additional damning items. A small pocket-sized camera with pictures of the park taken at odd hours, one picture of the maintenance shed on June 13th, the day before the disappearance. In the picture, a tiny figure was barely discernible near the shed doorway, a child. The camera's metadata showed Gaston had taken the photographs. That explained part of the puzzle. The photos that had earlier been traced to Simon for access were not proof of Simon's guilt. Simon, the obsessive gardener, had indeed taken pictures of the park, but had done so for his own reasons. Gaston had also taken photographs, hidden and targeted, to plan. He had watched the family, collected moments, learned when a child would be at a certain bench, what times the parents were distracted. Elena realized how the earlier trail, Simon's obsession, his secret photos, and Henry's late-night park entries had all been the precise smoke Gaston wanted to create. He knew the town would look first at its eccentrics and its fractured family, rather than on the quiet, familiar face of a cousin who had always been around, but never suspected. In February 18, 2020, 10:40 a.m. With the fiber match, sedative bottle, phone pings, and the camera metadata, the warrant was sealed. Officers moved quietly. Gaston was at home when they arrived. He did not resist arrest.
At February 20, 2019, the case that had haunted Rosewood for over half a year was nearing its end. The corridors of the precinct were heavy with the smell of coffee and exhaustion. Detective Elena Rousseau sat at her desk, reviewing the final set of lab reports, when the door creaked open. Henry and Marie Moreau stepped in quietly, pale, smaller somehow than they had once been. They had aged years in months. Grief had carved lines into their faces that no comfort could smooth. Elena stood, her voice low but steady. "You don't have to be here for this part," she said gently. But Henry shook his head. "We do. We've lived every moment of this nightmare. We need to see it end." November 28, 2019. The night Lila's body was found will forever be burned into memory. When the forensics team confirmed it was her, Marie and Henry insisted on seeing her one last time before the autopsy. The doctors hesitated, but grief has a way of breaking rules. They stood together beside the small, cold table, hands trembling as they touched the soft curls that still framed her face. "She's just a child," Marie whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I can't let them cut her open. Please, Detective Rousseau, I can't." Elena swallowed hard. "Marie, the autopsy could help us find who did this. It's what Lila deserves." But Henry's voice was hoarse. "She's been through enough. Let her rest whole. We can't bear to know how much she suffered." The request was signed that night, a temporary halt to the procedure. Elena didn't fight it. She knew what it was like to lose something that could never be replaced. Weeks later, one strand of evidence broke through the darkness. A fingerprint on Lila's hair ribbon, preserved by chance. As suspected, it matched someone's, Gaston Moreau, Henry's cousin. A guy who was constantly in their house, grieving as it seemed. But behind his sympathetic face, envy festered. When confronted with the recent findings, Gaston's calm facade crumbled. "I never meant to kill her," he stammered, tears streaking his cheeks. "I just wanted Henry to feel what I felt. Forgotten, cast aside. Everything he had, his job, his family, that little girl who adored him. It made me sick." He confessed through sobs. He had lured Lila near the abandoned greenhouse at the edge of the park, intending only to frighten her and send an anonymous message. But when she began to scream, he sedated her, pressed his hand over her mouth, and didn't stop until she fell silent. Lila Moreau's cause of death, asphyxiation. A single, irreversible act, born of bitterness and rage. By 4 p.m., March 10, 2020, at the Rosewood courtroom. When the verdict was read, the silence in the courtroom felt heavier than stone. Gaston Moreau, found guilty of the kidnapping and murder of Lila Marie Moreau. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Marie wept quietly into Henry's shoulder. There was no satisfaction in justice, only a hollow kind of relief, the kind that lets you breathe again, even if it hurts. The judge's voice softened as he turned toward the parents.
Marie and Henry Moreau, for your obstruction during the investigation, this court recognizes your actions were driven by grief, not malice. You are fined and placed under community service. No further sentence will be carried out. Elena lowered her eyes. It was mercy, and it was right. By 5:30 p.m., March 21st, 2020. Spring had just begun to touch the town again. The air smelled faintly of cherry blossoms and rain. Lila's grave was small and simple, beneath a willow tree where soft petals drifted in the breeze. Her teddy bear sat beside the headstone, its once bright fur faded now from too many tears. Marie knelt by the grave, her hands resting on the cool stone. "She didn't deserve this," she whispered. Henry's voice trembled. "No, but she's free now. She's whole." Detective Elena stood a few steps away, silent, her heart heavy, yet still. For the first time since the day Lila disappeared, the air in Rosewood felt still again. Not peaceful, not yet, but still. Justice had come. The truth had been found. And though grief would never leave, the nightmare had finally found its end.